it's really kind of it's a smart move from him, and it was something on the spot. So you guys can see he's definitely a good player, at least creative. So at this stage in the game, it's important for me to not allow my expansion or my opponent to grab more expansions. I need more map control, and unfortunately, he's been really keeping my overlords contained, hasn't allowed me to get that map control. Because he does have a Viking, he has his Marines out and about. On top of that, I really should be trying to take out that 9 o'clock or that 3 o'clock Expo, but I'm not sure where my opponent's going to strike next, and it looks like he is going to go for a pretty huge drop, and he actually killed off that hatchery that he did place off, that auxiliary hatchery. And now I'm going to move in with a ton of Banelings, and I am going to plague his forces, which means they cannot run away from the Banelings. Huge hits there to my opponent, and this is exactly what I needed to do. I had the counter composition to deal with his large infantry, and now the Hydralisks are purely for cleanup. His dropships evacuate the area, but I do take out the majority of his forces. And now is the time to secure my expansion, as well as possibly take out his 9 o'clock, or his 3 o'clock, excuse me. So I know I'm definitely in the lead after that major battle, at least, if not in the lead, at least evened out with my opponent. It's all about game sense, guys. And you guys can see the upgrades have been ticking away from my Hydras. So really the wise thing for me right here would have been to attack that planetary fortress. I'm not quite sure why I didn't do it sooner. I think what I wanted to do was try to stay in control and slowly get an advantage by getting that 12 o'clock up. But my opponent is wisely getting some siege tanks, once again exploiting this this map. And it's great access for Terran players. I'm just going to move in and snipe out the tanks anyways. But the harsh thing is, even though he does have a planetary fortress at the 3, I think attacking it, I would have lost a ton of Hydras. Because if you pull all your SCVs off the line to repair that fortress, it's just so difficult to take it down. And so I think that's what I was thinking in this game, and I was thinking, you know what? I'm just going to try to get the 12 o'clock up, and I'm going to try to slowly get a bigger advantage by getting my economy on 3 bases. And holding on to that instead of risking it all and trying to take out that 3. But you guys can see I do have a fair bit more of map control now after I won that battle pretty convincingly. I have much more map control. I'm able to move out a little bit more with my overlords. Now I have about half the map of vision. And now I'm actually thinking about making a small attack, maybe a small push on its planetary fortress, and I see that my opponent has secured his natural. And so it looks like I'm going to go for the natural expansion here. And you guys can see my opponent was prepared for an attack at the 3 o'clock, and I do have a favorable position over my opponent. Unfortunately, my Banelings are kind of out of position. They're not going to be able to do any damage there, so I'm going to fall back just a little bit and continue to macro the game up, get more forces. And if only I hadn't lost my hatcheries 3 times now, I probably would have been in such a huge advantage in this game. And you guys can see, I am at Hive Tech now, and I am getting the mighty Ultralisk. My opponent now resorting to late game Reapers, which is actually pretty good. Reapers coming in the late game can actually do quite a bit of damage to the drone line, so never exclude that as a possibility. But I am getting the mighty Ultras now, which are kind of controversial because they kind of suck right now in Starcraft 2. It's almost better to get Broodlords. But I have this crazy fanaticism about Ultras, so I almost always get Ultras whenever I can instead of Broodlords. I just think they're so much cooler. We'll see if that costs me this game, as my opponent once again, moving in with the Reapers, has actually killed off all the drones, and it only takes 3 shots for a Reaper to kill off a worker. And so those Reapers can one-shot my workers. It was a nice play there from my opponent, and now I'm actually down to only two mining bases.
We require more minerals.
You guys can see my main is actually starting to get mined out now as well, but I am starting to pump out the first set of Ultras. You guys can see one is already there on the way. Now the important thing about Ultras, The must-do for Ultras, you guys can see I'm securing another expansion. It's important to make sure they get in the right position. You never ever want to attack with Zerglings and Ultras and your main force in one frontal attack, because the Ultras, unfortunately, are never going to get in there to do the damage. They're just going to get stuck behind all the forces. And I'm actually engaging a little bit out of position, throwing down actually a ton of fungal growth, which is going to weaken my opponent's forces, but you guys can see the point defense drones are actually blocking off all of my Hydra's attacks, so that was a pretty bad position for me. I took a ton of damage. Now the Seeker missiles coming out and finishing off my Hydras. You guys can see the Ultra is getting stuck behind the Hydras and the majority of the forces. That is bad, 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 because then the Ultra is worthless. Now you guys can imagine that battle would have turned out so much more differently if I had been able to get a flank off with my forces. And unfortunately, due to the map design, it's really, really impossible to get any kind of flank action as a Zerg player. So now I'm actually paying off a little bit for getting these Ultralists, because unfortunately, if you get Ultras on this map, the only way they're going to attack is in the front with the majority of your forces. There is no possibility to flank. And so that's a big, big problem here. Now my opponent, even though I had been slowly gaining momentum in the mid game, after that battle, I feel like my opponent is actually back in control. He was able to take a large majority of my forces down, and I didn't really do much damage to him. Now he's pushing out. He's got infantry, siege tanks, and those ravens as well. I did get a lot of fungal growth. Look at that Ultralist doing some nice damage, but it gets taken out almost immediately. And wow, my opponent's just got so much more forces. And yeah, just pushing up that shortcut, using that to abuse the Terran mobility, and coming up the backside. And the fact of the matter is the map is way too narrow to get a flank off upon my opponent, and so he was able to take me out, and I do call GG. And I don't feel bad about it, because I think a good way to teach players is to teach them how to play 1v1 and still lose. I don't think it's always about winning. So that was basically a 1v1 game on the ladder that I did lose. My opponent was like rank 3 or something like that. So I hope you guys enjoyed that game, and hopefully stay tuned for more games to come. Thanks a lot, guys, and once again, I am a Zerg player primarily, so most of my FP views will be Zerg. Thanks a lot, guys.